lot of this is part of their service.
China is evolving very quickly, but it's not spinning off its axis. So when I talk about the Chinese worldview, what I'm basically saying is regardless of what generation you're on, there is a need for stability in order to have confidence in the future. And there is a tension in the heart of Chinese people between projection of status and protection of economic and social interests. So again, regarding the worldview, regardless of whether you're talking about Confucianism or Taoism, stability is sublime, and stability is tantamount to progress. But of course, China is a dynamic market. Just take a look around and what's happened. Now, when you get into the post-90s and the Zhou Wu Ho and the Ling Ling Ho, the question is, are they becoming individualistic in a Western sense? And by individualistic, I mean, do they define themselves independent of their obligations and responsibilities to other people? A lot of the millennial language that we use in the West and in China is the same, living in the now, enjoying experience, but ultimately, number one, millennials, once they start having families, their behavior becomes much more traditional because the burden reasserts itself. But also, even when you market to millennials, you don't want to just say, go have fun, all right? You want to make sure that millennials are able to leave their mark by pursuing their passion, despite the fact that the world is an old, regimented world, So there's still tensions going on there. But when you say leave your mark, this is the importance of social currency, right? This is the importance of social networks, WeChat moments. This is a way of generating acknowledgement, external acknowledgement, and that remains timelessly Chinese. When it comes to food, even though, scale helps, all right? So Kofco, for example, I remember after the melamine crisis, for example, Kofco, which is basically the P&G of foods, nobody knew what it was. We did an image campaign to talk about the reliability of their supply chain management, and awareness went through the roof. When you take a look at Xiaomi, when you take a look at Oppo, scale reassures. So you do have to start from scale, and you do have to start from making sure that you're reassuring on whatever the category concern is. But when it comes to babies, all right, and when it comes to the vulnerable and the apple of every mother and father's eyes, you're absolutely right. It's got to be a big challenge to make sure that every strand of fiber is safe. And in that sense, international brands have a natural advantage. One more thing. I think that as China keeps on evolving up the value chain, the fear might become less. But ultimately, it's institutional. It's based on the structure of Chinese society and how corporate governance works. So it's a long-term road to hoe. This is just a basic truth of marketing, that the higher involvement the category is, all right, the more important it is to your life, the more complicated the purchase processes and the buying processes. And that's why it's not just a television ad. The television ad's purpose is so that people can passively receive a position, all right, a identity, all right? But then throughout the entire purchase process and beyond, you have to have active engagement that's not only reinforcing that, but also going into a lot of the very product specifics that people want to know about, whether it be safety, whether it be fuel efficiency, whether it be color. So in general, the high involvement categories, which are ones that advance your life, ones that help project your identity, and also ones that are life and death, they definitely require, all right, a multi-dimensional approach to building that brand. What I'm advocating, right, and the reason why I show films is because it's the most efficient way of saying, define your brand identity and purpose, and make sure that every time people engage with it, even if you're talking about fuel efficiency for that Volkswagen, it's doing it in a way that is reinforcing the brand message. Definitely. I think that the lurch towards social platforms and e-commerce is devastating. And I think that the degradation of tactics, to brand building and equity generation is just short of disaster. So unless people are satisfied with ever declining margins, you have to make sure that you're doing the timeless things right as well. Generally speaking, well, it's something that's been true for a long time right now, all right? And that is that lower tier cities tend to need more protective benefits. You know, they don't take things as much for granted in terms of safety. So if you're marketing an automobile, for example, you do need to focus more of your marketing budget on the safety that is, and they're also newer consumers, so they're not, the messages need to be simpler. But one thing that's changing is, and we saw this in the BRI index, is that first tier cities don't just want empty status anymore. All right. First, they're becoming much more confident. In fact, if you take a look at the brand Huawei, it's more relevant in first tier cities than it is in second and third tier cities. And that's because I think first tier city denizens are becoming more self-confident as consumers and need the badge less as a statement of identity. They still want to project identity, but they don't need to do it in the same very obvious way. That's evolving.